Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to spend a few words revisiting these KZ ZSNs. These are the originals, not the pros. And doing that using the Chesky Records Ultimate Demonstration Disc, which is, you can almost see it down there, it says, A Guide to Critical Listening. And this is a pretty good basic, reference set or intro to critical listening. And I, like, some of you read reviews and they're like, oh, the soundstage is wide, big, high, low. And it's kind of hard to find reference music that everyone can listen to and kind of hear the same thing. So this is sort of one step in that direction. And I actually started using it, trying to figure out how good this is. My new, used, cracked LG V30 Plus. I was looking for a DAP, and I didn't really find a budget one that I liked, and I ended up going on eBay and picking up a V30 Plus, and we'll talk about that some other time. But I sort of needed some reference material to figure out, is this thing actually any better than my old phone, or my new old phone, which is a Samsung 10 Plus, which is pretty good. I was just wondering, if this thing is actually any better or not. If you go through all the glowing reviews of it, it's pretty much the best audio you find on a phone with quad DSPs. So, story for another day. So let's talk about the KZ ZSNs, which came out probably a year ago, and they sort of got relegated to the back seat because the ZSN Pros came out, and then the ZS10 Pros came out. And these guys kind of got forgotten along the way. I just happened to grab them, and I didn't really intend to do it. When I got the phone, I'm like, I'll just start listening. And I ended up with the ZSNs. And then I found the demonstration disc, and I was like, it sounds really good. And I think everything is going to sound really good on the demonstration disc, just the way it's recorded. And if you look around, when people ask for reference material that's mastered very well or recorded to really bring out instrumentation, people sort of refer to these Chesky records, whether it's the Ultimate Demonstration Disc or his other recordings. They're all, sort of reference material for sounding great. So let's sort of we're going to walk through some of the references here. There's actually more on the CD, but the main topics are transparency, depth, mid-range purity, dynamics test, presence, visceral impact, and holographic imaging. And the way that the CD actually works is you'll see, all these tracks, and there'll be sort of an intro to high resolution, and then he'll have a song. And high resolution one, which he doesn't point out in the beginning, is Spanish Harlem. And if you've looked around on message boards a lot, you'll see Spanish Harlem mentioned a lot, and it's an amazing recording, and you should probably add it to your library. I think it's Rebecca Pigeon's Spanish Harlem. I think a lot of people use that as, hey, I got some new speakers, or I got some new headphones, let's listen to Spanish Harlem. So he used it as a test for high resolution, and high resolution is the ability to really make out the tiniest details of a song or instrument. And in this case, the voice is sort of right there in the middle. It's beautiful, but sort of off in the back is this guy with a shaker. And the intro talks about, well, does every shake of the shaker sound unique? And I'll have to admit that is pretty tough to do on the ZSN. And maybe it's the phone, maybe it's a ZSN, maybe it's the Spotify version of the demonstration disc. But man, you got to be really focused on listening to the shaker to really, admit that each one of those sounds unique. To me, it's just a tough sound. You're talking about, sort of a series of beats hitting this instrument. So it's not just like a drum snare where you get like one sharp attack impulse. It's, sort of multiple. That was pretty tough, and I'll have to admit, maybe that's why he didn't list it as a major topic, but that one's difficult, so we'll kind of move on to depth. So depth is, does an instrument sound as far away from the microphone as it was recorded? So in this test, he actually has I think it's a saxophone. What is it? No, so I don't remember what horn it is, but one of the horns is about 10 feet from the microphone. And he plays a note, and at first it's like, yeah, it kind of sounds 10 feet. And then the vocals come in, and then you can kind of hear a little more depth of where the horn actually is. But on the ZSN, I think it's pretty difficult. I think that's one of the things that really sets apart the ZSN Pro and the ZS10 Pro. So that became a little more pronounced than on the original ZSNs. I think in general, soundstage, holographic imaging, sound imaging, whatever you want to call it, the precise location of instruments and sort of the width and depth of the soundstage, where the music appears to be playing from, is something that when people say, well, is it really worth upgrading from the ZSN to the Pro or the 10 Pro? For me, that's a lot of where that upgrade lies. These things do amazing bass, and probably more bass than the Pros. But as far as this amazing ethereal atmospheric soundstage, I think a lot of the initial reviews talked about this as the sound really emanates from inside your head, and that's somewhat true. I wouldn't 100% go there, but the depth isn't as deep, or it's at least hard to recognize the horn player, as being 10 feet away from the microphone, compared to the ZS10 Pros, which it becomes more apparent. Your brain just has more of a feeling of, oh, that guy is actually located 10 feet behind. So mid-range purity, another interesting one. So instead of a shaker, he's got a snap, and there's a kind of a constant snap through the song, and the intro is like, does that sound like your hand snapping? Do you hear, the snap and the rubbing of the fingers and all that? And yeah, I think the ZSN does really well on mid-range purity. Plus the guy's vocals, right above it sound great. Male vocals, so you get this full rich voice with a sharp snap in the back. Very nice recording. Sounds great on the ZSNs. Transparency is all about, does the singer sound as natural as it should? Does your brain believe that is the singer standing there? Not so much, in a microphone, but does it feel like that singer is there singing? And again, the ZSNs do really well at that. Better than most of the reviews, especially on the vocals. People never really said, oh, the ZSN was a super duper vocal IM, but when you listen to recordings of this caliber, yeah, it sounds pretty amazing. So presence, this test was all about the soundstage, and it's actually an interesting one. So he sets up the recording, so there's a saxophone player playing towards the wall, away from the microphone, but he's still close to the microphone. So his instructions are, well, does it sound like, a saxophone is, his location, I think, was just off to the right. So yeah, so immediately, unlike depth, the ZSNs do the soundstage, sort of lateral side to side really well. So yeah, the sax seemed like he was right there, right where he should be, between, I think, the center and the right. And then some of the smaller things, he's like, well, the soundstage is set up so he's playing against the wall, so you should be able to hear not only him playing the saxophone and breathing and the keys, which come across really well in the ZSN, but the tiny echoes and sound playing off the wall because he's playing in that direction. That, I don't know, I don't get it, and maybe that's just a detail lost in the compression. Maybe it's the ZSNs, or maybe it's the phone. Hard to discern that much detail, and that's almost a high resolution thing. The saxophone sounds amazing, but are you hearing every reverberation off the wall? I couldn't do it, but maybe it's there. Visceral Impact, another kind of famous song, Sweet Georgia Brown. Visceral Impact does the music really sound energetic? Does it get you moving? And yeah, it sounds amazing on these. The second part of this Visceral Impact, he sets up 2 drum kits, sort of one behind the other, and they trade back and forth. And he's like, you should clearly be able to tell whether one is in front of the other. And again, the depth on the ZSN, it's a little hard. Your brain recognizes something is going on. The 2 drum kits sound unique. There's something there. Does it sound, exactly like one is behind the other? On the ZSNs, not nearly as much as the ZS10 Pros, which, it almost sounds like there's literally 2 drum kits playing right one in front of the other ones, and it's very clear what's going on. So, tonality-wise, that the drum kits are set up differently and they sound unique, but their precise location and depth, I'll say that the depth isn't my favorite part of the ZSN either. Holographic imaging is sort of taking depth to the next level. And he talks about, this huge soundstage, ethereal, atmospheric. And I think it's supposed to be it was a church. And the microphone was placed, I think, above the church, above the choir and the instruments. And you're supposed to get this feeling of this enormous church and sound all around you. It doesn't come across in the ZSN, and I don't exactly know why, because it seems like it's all there, but when I listen to it, it actually sounds a lot smaller than what he describes, and it doesn't sound like a church. I mean, if you've been in a church and heard, even if you're on the ground listening to it, the sound is all around you and it's bouncing off the walls, and I think it always sounds unique. And this, to me, the holographic imaging didn't sound nearly as natural as it should. So that was that. So dynamics test, the ZSN does super well. There's actually 2 of them. One was, he calls them transients, and that's changes in level. So super fast changes in level and loudness. And, the ZSN is sort of set up to do things like that. Hybrid architecture, it's super fast at doing those level changes. Second one is a bass resonance, or maybe that's not. That was a different test. No, I think that was a different test. The other dynamics test was a percussion test, and again, he starts playing drums at a very low level, and then it slowly builds. And again, the ZSNs do super good on that. No problems there. The bass resonance was one that harder on the ZSNs, and I think it's harder for pretty much any small dynamic driver to really pull that one off. I think it was a stand-up bass or a double bass, and he's like, well, you could hear the plucking of the strings, and then you have to hear the full body resonate, and you shouldn't hear any non-musical notes coming out. And I don't think these guys are there to handle that test. I'm not sure at what level of IEM you have to, throw money at to get to that part where it's pure music and there's no off notes there. They're super low and super difficult to reproduce. So I will say that, the KZ $20 range is maybe not going to do as well in the bass resonance as some of the higher ones do. So that's kind of a spin through the Chesky Records Ultimate Demonstration Disc with the ZSNs. And I was using this on Spotify. It's actually up there if you look around for Chesky Demonstration Disc. It's up on Spotify. Give it a listen. Or I think it's actually on HD Tracks or Amazon. You could buy it in a couple other places. But like I said, it's kind of a good starting place if you want to know what is really involved with upgrading from one KZ to another KZ. Where is the ZSN Pro any better than the ZSN? Well, depends. Some of these are different on the ZSN Pro than the ZSN, and so this at least gives you some kind of reference characterization that says, well, here are the differences. When you throw another $20 at it, some of these things will sound better. You'll get more depth, and you'll get a wider sound stage. Maybe the holographic imaging will sound, closer to what it should sound like. So that's that. I think one of the last videos, someone asked me about these headphone ties. They are straight up, I think, from Amazon. They're called hook and latch tape, I think. But it's basically just a Velcro roll, and you pull off 2 or 3 inches, and it sticks to itself. Super cheap. These are BUBM, and they've got their logo all over it. And I think there's other versions on Amazon which are the same thing, but that's what they look like. Someone mentioned it. I like them. I'm sure BUBM is not the only brand of the same exact material. So if you're looking to keep these things a little tighter than just wrapping them around your fingers and throwing them in a ball, that's what I use. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.